I swear to you, when I first laid eyes on this dude, he was perpendicular to the ground, or not perpendicular, like horizontal to the ground, hanging at a 90-degree off a stop sign. And I was like, what the hell did I just get myself into? And since that, we had a budding, flourishing relationship, been best friends our whole lives. Obviously, life got in the way. You go to college, you get married, you start businesses, things happen. Fittingly enough, our midlife crisis brought us back together, hence the name. We're older than most people in this space, but we found NFTs about a year ago, and then we said, you know what, we're really gonna create a company. As we get more connected, as we go into the metaverse, what we're about to do is meeting new people, having real raw conversations. We think it's gonna become a lost art. So we're here to make that happen, to bring it all to you, and to help you expand, learn, and grow. And we came up with a very simple mission statement. That mission statement is to bring back the lost art of genuine human connection. And I got one last thing to say, and I'm dead serious when I say this. I genuinely, and Maddie genuinely believes we were put on earth to do exactly what we're doing now. We love doing this. We love meeting new people, and it just gets us so freaking excited. We think you as family, and we love you all. So, at the base and the heart of midlife crisis, not gonna lie, it's Mikey G and Maddie Mintz. And why it is because over 30 years ago, I met this crazy SOB at the 4th grade bus stop. I swear to you, when I first laid eyes on this dude, he was perpendicular to the ground, or not perpendicular, like horizontal to the ground, hanging at a 90-degree off a stop sign. And I was like, what the hell did I just get myself into? And since that, we had a budding, flourishing relationship, been best friends our whole lives. Obviously, life got in the way. You go to college, you get married, you start businesses, things happen. Fittingly enough, our midlife crisis brought us back together, hence the name. We're older than most people in this space, but we found NFTs about a year ago, and then we said, you know what, we're really gonna create a company. As we get more connected, as we go into the metaverse, what we're about to do is meeting new people, having real raw conversations. We think it's gonna become a lost art. So we're here to make that happen, to bring it all to you, and to help you expand, learn, and grow. And we came up with a very simple mission statement. That mission statement is to bring back the lost art of genuine human connection. And I got one last thing to say, and I'm dead serious when I say this. I genuinely, and Maddie genuinely believes we were put on earth to do exactly what we're doing now. We love doing this. We love meeting new people, and it just gets us so freaking excited. We think you as family, and we love you all. So, at the base and the heart of midlife crisis, not gonna lie, it's Mikey G and Maddie Mintz. And why it is because over 30 years ago, I met this crazy SOB at the sound on. What up, folks? I turned the sound on. I said, what up, folks? The first time, then I turned the sound on.
Twitter Space?
Twitter Space will get up and running here soon, but I appreciate that.
Good.
Damn, man, it's been a while. I mean, we had a little bit of break because of the holiday vacation, you know, Thanksgiving and all, but we're back, and it feels always so good to be back. I fucking love doing this, and I love being here, and I'm so excited about our guests tonight. Maddie, how are you doing? How was the big break? I felt like you had a good time.
I did, man. You know, it's holidays, man. It's Thanksgiving. It's a good time to sit and reflect. If everybody participates the way, you know, I think it was intended, right? You kind of talk, you're supposed to think about some things you're thankful for.
Right.
And of course, hanging around family and people traveling and whatnot, and actually getting to see people you don't get to see for a while. That's always awesome, man. It's always good. It was a good refresh. And then a nice long weekend. It was good. You know, getting ready for the season. Christmas lights are starting to come up. All that stuff. You know, it's one of the good times of the year. I know you like that time of the year too.
Hell yeah, man. I mean, my wife might have gone a little overboard on just making sure it looked pretty, dude. It's one of the most pretty, impressive Thanksgiving table setups I've ever seen. I think you saw a picture
Mm,
of it, but
I did. I did.
hey, listen, it made her happy. And as long as she's happy, happy wife, happy life is what they say.
Well,
And I,
I will. It's kind of cool to go all out every once in a while. You know what I mean? I mean, I
yeah,
will say that picture had some like Martha Stewart vibes. Just gonna say.
she did it. I mean, it wasn't like she saw a picture on Instagram and she's like, I'm going to replicate this. This was like her going to a couple stores and manifesting some cool ass charger plates and miniature pumpkins and sparkles and stuff on the table spread. But yeah, it was great. And, but let's get into it, man. I'm super excited for the conversation. I know you got a couple juicy tidbits about our guests tonight. I'm super excited to have this conversation going, and then we'll ask the world famous midlife crisis questions. So go for it, brother.
All right, sounds good. So first of all, trying to do a little bit of a little bit of different format, right? Because you all know that have been listening that we always try to get an interesting fun fact from whoever our guest is, right? But the whole point of that is we want you to know that we bring exciting people on the show and you get to see that over a long form conversation, but just to kind of whet your appetite. And when I say it like that, then it gets really exciting, right? Um, I want you to get an idea who it is we're bringing in here. Okay. So this gentleman, Michael here, graduate from SoCal Business School, 29 years old. Little fun fact, played golf while he was in college. So he's a collegiate golfer. I know him and Mikey are going to connect on that. What I thought is cool is had a little bit of a detour. We've all been there where we have that moment where we say, am I Bruce Springsteen? Or can I be the next Bruce Springsteen? Or can I be the next big person in Hollywood or music? So he did have a little music detour there. Thought he was going to be a music producer, but what he ended up getting grounded back on was actually got involved with tech startups and commercial real estate, two very, very volatile but highly profitable areas of business. And that's what eventually led him to this space here. And so we're going to be able to break that down. But I'm very, very excited because this is a young, very entrepreneur-minded person with some amazing abilities, and we're excited to have him here today. Mike, how you doing?
I'm good, guys. Thank you so much for having me on. I just want to say, first of all, thank you for having me here. We had spoken, Mikey and I think a couple weeks back, had a great conversation. It's great to, be on here live with you guys and get down to the nitty gritty.
Hell yeah,
All right.
man. Super, super excited. So, uh, you're in the ringer, man. I mean, you're in the likes of, damn, we've had Dex from Phantom Network, Digimental from Hape, Helen from Operation Sin, some pretty big names, all the way down to some small projects. And they've all been asked the same one famous midlife crisis question. And that is, how did you get to the seat you're sitting in today? Please give us Star Wars episode 1, 2, and 3. Cannot wait to hear all about it.
Awesome. Okay, so episode one, I guess we could rewind the clock all the way back to kind of where I'm from, get you a little background about who I am. Born and raised in Southern California to first generation American here. So my mom was from South Korea, my father was from Iran. So they both ended up here in Southern California randomly enough, met each other while they were working, and started a family down here. And that's kind of where I have an older sister who I actually live with right now, and that's where we've stayed for the majority of our lives. And we kind of were throughout uh, raised through private school throughout my entire life. Went to a Catholic school growing up, and went to a Catholic high school that's very well known in the area. It's called Mater Dei. It's a well known sports high school. So I played golf there, like Matt alluded to. It was very focused on golf and education and things like that. And after Mater Dei, I graduated and went to University of Southern California. So that's obviously local to here as well. Studied at the business school and graduated there with honors. And after college, I wanted to get my feet wet into the entrepreneurial space. I actually started at a tech startup during a period of time when I would say the world was trying to Uberfy the world.
Yeah, that's a
So
good way to put it. That's a good way to put it.
it was like, once Uber like had this product market fit, it was like if you could create on-demand anything,
Yeah, yeah.
everyone was gonna give their best try. So I was actually at essentially like a Uber meets home cleaning startup. And we had basically, started as a local platform and grew it to a national
What
platform
was it called?
It was called Tidy at the
Okay.
time.
Okay.
And we basically grew it from a one market local platform to a national platform over the course of 24 months. Long story short, won't go too much into it, but they had their own kind of financing issues on the company itself,
Right.
and they had like this apocalyptic layoff is the way I would describe what happened. So it was as
Explain
if
it. Well, you can't just say
I
apocalyptic layoff and not give us
Yeah.
any description, man. What does an apocalyptic layoff mean?
So I feel like I have to tread a little lightly because some of it
Yeah.
I don't think was I guess
Tread
like
tread as light as you can.
legal.
Obviously, don't reveal anything you're comfortable with, but maybe expand on that just a 10.
Sure, it had nothing to do with me. We'll just say that. So it was it basically the way that they were financing the company.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they had a line of credit that was essentially creating bigger lines of credit, and they were able to self fund and hyper grow the company through this line of credit.
Right.
And I'll just say they got greedy, and the line of credit overnight basically disappeared.
Oh.
So, so running the company off this line of credit to hyperscale the company, which it was doing great, but they just got to the point where they were trying to bite off more than they could chew, and then when that kind of like rug pull happened, essentially everyone had to go home because they couldn't pay anybody.
Yeah.
So like it was literally like Thursday went to Friday. Friday they had an all hands on deck meeting and said like everyone in this room all has to go home. So I was literally
Wow.
sitting there. This is my first job out of school, in the startup world, and I feel like I got a very visceral, like this is the downside. You always hear of all these like here's the exit, here's this, here's that. They
Yup.
don't tell you.
Yup.
They don't tell you about the other side of the coin, which is like you can be in a room with 50 other people and everyone has to go home that day.
Right.
So
So I want to
so
cut in
that
here
was
real quick, and we rarely do this, but it's such, it's just so striking to hear that story and then think about what has happened in the NFT space in the last 6 months. Do you want to expand upon that anymore? Like, just, I'd love to hear from your point of view. You were part of it in quote unquote the real world and the real job market, and I feel like a lot of similar things have happened in this space. Can you talk to that at all?
Yeah, I think also in the real world, I think this could be also happening again. But with regards to the space, I mean, we'll probably get into it as well, but I think it really will end up testing everyone's true conviction. I think everyone has conviction when things are going really well. And then, when things start going wrong is really when you find out why people are actually here,
Right.
why people want to continue to be here.
Right. Yeah.
So that's even we had like that May sell off too, which was also kind of like a who wants to be here, again, right? There's like kind of like a before the tidal wave test, so to speak. And I think
Correct.
even now we're getting into like another version of that, probably more significant now that a lot more drastic things have happened,
Yeah.
even within the past 30 days. But yeah, I think it really comes down to like, the reason why you're here at the end of the day and what you believe in, and I think those are the things that continue in my head. There's like even that continual test of like I don't even know what you would call it, but like the external coming in and hitting you in the face. And you having to ask yourself like, oh, why am I here? Is this, is this real? Is this why I want to be here? And all that good stuff. So, um,
Very well said. Very well said. And I actually really like your last point there is,
Hmm.
uh, you know, great actually insight is absolutely. That's the question that a lot of people have asked. Why are you actually here? And to kind of talk just real quick about why I think midlife is still here, right? Is because we're here to understand people. We could give a flying hell if your project is the most hype thing at all. We want to understand why you're doing what you're doing. And if we think you're a good person and doing it for the right reasons, we think that actually equates to success. So I actually really appreciate that insight, man. Thanks for sharing.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. So do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, keep on going.
Or
Yep.
Sorry.
Let's keep it rolling.
head, head back to the apocalypse?
Yeah, let's go. So we're
Yes.
at the apocalypse.
So that probably spurred my, I know you guys were the midlife crisis, but that was probably my quarter life crisis
Yes.
began
Yes.
after that. So I actually had my own crisis of my own when I was, laid off in that moment. And that, to Matt's point about the fun facts, kicked off my kind of like quasi want to be the next music producer, DJ Calvin Harris, uh, stint. So that was like an interesting time. I think, when those kinds of like shocks happen, I think sometimes people need time to like process
Mm-hmm.
sometimes.
Yep.
And,
It's our Tyler
all,
Durden moments.
sure. And I think even just like hashing what I just talked about how I was raised, I came from a very, like Southern California, this big sports school, goes to USC, that's kind of like this train track almost of a life path that a lot of people mirror in my area. So I, I think this was kind of the first instance where I was like trying to veer away from almost like the normal life, quote unquote, and trying to do something different for myself. And it was just an exploratory phase of my life where I wanted to do something that I hadn't really had any skill set before. Besides playing the piano for like 8 years growing up, it wasn't something that I would consider like quote unquote passion until I'd say college.
Yeah.
And, I spent significant time just trying to get better, self teaching myself the whole process, and then and then eventually getting into some internships in Hollywood since I'm nearby at some studios. So that was kind of the stint where I was like trying to explore, I guess, my creative outlet, quote unquote.
Sure. Yeah.
And it ended up being a great thing for me to learn how I could learn something new from scratch. I think a lot of times people will, not want to start something because they know they're going to be bad at it. And I think
Mm.
part of I think the biggest takeaway from that whole experience was being okay with not being good in the beginning, but still pushing through to see it through to get to a level of competency. So, but music doesn't make too much money, and kind of the rubber met the road to some degree, which kind of kicked off the next phase of my life, which was getting into private equity commercial real estate, which was kind of what I actually was studying at USC during like the summer internships and stuff. So it was almost like, I kind of went away from the nest and I kind of coming back to what I had learned and all those relationships I've built previously
Yeah.
to those two endeavors. So I had done that for the better part of 5 years, and I think it was a great experience in terms of like learning how to be a professional, learning like the structure of how to do like deals and all that kind of like all that kind of stuff. But at the internal kind of like compass in me was kind of always like slowly grinding away, knowing that this wasn't really for me. And it was for a lot of people around me. It was almost like, everyone from Southern California that goes to USC, there's a lot of them that get into commercial real estate and become very successful. And it's a very tried and true method. And for me, it was almost just like it's just not. I felt like I tried so hard for it to like somehow click. I was waiting for the moment when it would click, and it just never clicked. And I made basically this kind of started alongside when the NFT wave started happening, and you know, it was an opportunity in my eyes to, you know, potentially get into something that's new, that's moving, that has energy, that I enjoyed, that's different than anything I've ever done before. And I also was just getting sick of the path that I saw myself going down for the next 20 years, 30 years.
Oh,
So
gotcha.
so my, I guess, mid slash quarter life crisis kind of hit its head at the beginning of this year, or yeah, beginning of this year. Um, However, my involvement in NFTs kind of goes all the way back to I think it was May, right around when Bored Apes were minting. I'd say like probably May. What is that? May of 2021? Is
Mm-hmm.
that what it was?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'd say that was like my first kind of like taste of it. I had a buddy who I'd known from college who like reached out to me. It was actually revolving CryptoPunks. It was like this, you know, Beeple came out with like that $69 million piece. CryptoPunks were flying off the shelves. Everyone's like, what is all this stuff? I had a friend call me. He's like, dude, this is the next big thing. It was funny. It was almost like my entrepreneur moment. Like I was like, oh yeah, that sounds great. And we started talking for like 2 hours and we're like, we should start all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. And then nothing happened after the call. It was like we talked about all this stuff, nothing happened for like 3 months. And then I'd say the summer, I think NFT summer of that summer is when I really got into the space, just as like a community member and a consumer and just getting my hands in as many projects as I could. And obviously,
Right.
um, all that good stuff. And you know, I was active in buying and selling a bunch of. I mean, I still remember. I think my first NFT was a bold badger. It was
A
I think
bold badger.
bold. Yeah, I could see if I could try and find a picture of it. I don't know if I still have it.
Mhm. S-
Um,
So real quick, I want to interrupt here because I always like to gauge this on Maddie because I think people don't really believe when we say like give us Star Wars episode 1, 2, and 3. So I felt like you gave us a condensed one and we started getting into 2. So I want to rewind quick and I
okay.
think we can start with your childhood and upbringing. So I have a couple questions. I'm sure Maddie will have some, but I want to make sure to not lose because you said a lot of really interesting things there.
Yep.
One being how your parents met, and then just growing up in Southern California, one of the most picturesque places in the world, right? Um, but then you were extremely successful, right? You went to one of the best sporting high schools in the state, which California is a massive state. You played golf at a very high level. So I kind of want to go back to kind of that upbringing, and I'd love to hear in your mind as you're going through growing up in Southern California, kind of finding yourself learning that you're really into golf. Um, what were some lessons learned there in the sense of, let's just start off with the family. When you look back to like your mom and your dad and what they concentrated on, kind of teaching you as you grew up, does anything come to mind that, really rings a bell or you look back to for support in times of, when you get fired from your startup job and have to figure out
Yeah.
that you want to be the next Calvin Harris?
And
I,
actually, real quick, just to interject, could you real quick, if you're cool sharing it, what do your parents do?
well, they're both retired now, but they had met at they were doing computer software
Okay.
back in the 90s.
Okay,
So,
Got it.
cool.
That I think also helps give us some context. So yeah, go knowing that, can you dive
sure,
into what Mike was saying?
sure. I think the biggest thing is that they were always supportive of whatever I wanted to do.
Okay.
I actually didn't start out, I actually started playing golf in eighth grade. So I only
Oh,
played, you know, but it was one of those things like I immediately got into it and it was like 100%. I was in
right.
100% right from that moment. But I was like very into soccer previous to that. I did like club soccer for like 8 years and that was what I was about at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But there's never a moment when they ever really pushed back on whatever I wanted to pursue. And I think when I think about how I grew up and where my interests cultivated, and even to your point about wanting to do the music thing, like it was never like a you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't do this. I think they were very encouraging in finding your own way and figuring things out on your own and seeing what you like by trying it first and knowing, okay, I don't like that, or I love this. Let's keep doing more of this. So
Right.
um, that's kind of the biggest thing. I think they also instilled in me a level of discipline as well. I think with that, to I guess the other side of the coin is there's a level of discipline that they had instilled. Just I remember just studying was very important at my house. Like my sister got like straight A's and all that stuff. I definitely probably didn't get as good as grades her, but I mean
Right.
there was always that culture inside the house that was bred, and I think
Yeah.
Yeah.
I find that valuable now. I think discipline, when motivation leaves you, all that's left is discipline. And I
Yes.
think
Sure.
when you start any new thing, even like the NFT space, like everyone right now, I think we're losing the motivation phase. And it's now going to turn into like discipline. Like, why are you here?
Yeah.
What are you trying to do? Are you going to be disciplined enough to go get what you want done?
Yeah.
And I think that's what those are the kind of the two things in my head when I think about um, how my parents brought me up.
No, I love it, man. That's fantastic. Maddie, anything before I move on to my next question?
Yeah. So I love what you shared there, and the concept of discipline. I guess one of the things what I'm curious about though is that um, your parents obviously were successful enough, right, to be able to send you and your sister to private schools. In one of them, again, it's not like you were in, Macon, Alabama here, right? You're in Southern California, so um, they were. I would say this: it's safe to say they were successful, and they were in computer software or software engineering of some sort. But that's a fairly how to say this? That's a pretty safe road, right? If you do that road in tech and software engineering and you work well, you work hard, you could have a great successful career, you know what I mean? But what I'm trying to say is it's not like they were at a startup, at least unless you're telling me they were. I mean, if it was like Google or something, that's one thing. But um were they just kind of an established companies?
Yeah. So, are you familiar with Cisco Systems? They've been
Yeah.
Yeah,
around for
absolutely. Of
years.
course.
So
Massive.
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
dad was like at Cisco Systems for like 25 years,
Yeah.
Yep.
long time, long time.
Yeah.
And I
Got it.
don't think it was like it. I think over the course of the 25 years, obviously, like you probably start out doing a lot of like of the actual engineering, and then it becomes
Sure.
more management
All
as you
right.
get
Yeah,
older,
yeah, that's the
right?
path for
So
sure. But the reason I ask is this is because they were in pretty established career positions, right? And I think it's interesting because you graduated and gravitated towards startups, which do have let's just say this. I mean, there's the risk factor, right? I mean, Mike was saying, we don't hear the other side of the startups, and you were saying the same thing. Um, but startups they've always had like this element of risk. People always say, "Ooh, you know that if 10 start, 9 will fail," kind of thing. Um, but then you went from startups to commercial real estate, which isn't, I wouldn't say necessarily like
Oh wait,
super
no, no,
risky, but
no. He went from startup to Calvin Harris.
I'm sorry. Yeah, yeah. I was gonna. So I got the timing wrong. Correct, correct. But then I was gonna say the music industry, and now in Web3. And what I'm saying is that 3 out of your 4 endeavors are definitely kind of risk-oriented areas. And what I'm curious about is where do you think that came from? Because
Great
your
question.
parents seem to be um, not, I don't want to say risk averse, but they certainly played it, kind of the long game. Where do you think that came from for you?
that is a really good question, and I've never thought of this question or in my life. Let me think.
No, and it's good. I'm excited that we asked the question that you've never thought of. And if you don't have an answer right off the bat, that's fine. I
Yeah,
mean, you can keep it in the back of your head. But I'll give you a moment to breathe. We like silence here. We're okay with it.
yeah.
Man, this is like some meta question. I wish I could like see myself in the third person. Why do I think this? Like, um, man, I
And
want to
like
put a
Mikey's, okay, good.
I I want to put a pin on this and let this marinate because I
Okay,
think there's an answer here. I want to give a good answer, but I don't
let's do it.
actually know. I actually don't. The answer right now is I don't know,
No,
and it's probably something.
Yeah.
Um, probably something. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
no.
Yeah.
Listen. That is an excellent answer. Putting a pin on it and saying you don't have an answer is absolutely an answer, and I think more people need to be comfortable saying that. So I
For
appreciate you
sure.
saying that. But yeah, I mean, just keep it in the back of the head as we go on, and if something comes to mind, like feel free to interject in the other conversation if something pops up. I mean, I think one of the things that you did mention though is it seems like your parents were very open for you to try new things.
Hmm.
So that's probably a little bit of an influence, but I'm sure there were other things. I wanna actually jump to because now you said something even more interesting to me. Um, you only started playing golf when you were
8th grade.
in 8th grade, and then you
Yep.
went on to play at a collegiate level,
I'll be right
uh,
back, Mike.
and at a high level, right? To play golf in college, even if you're at a D2, D3 school, wherever I forget where did you play at USC?
So I played. So actually, I had played college. So I went to University of Santa Barbara for a year and then
That's right.
transferred to SC.
Yeah.
And
So
and I was on scholarship for Santa Barbara, and then decided I wanted to just do the business school at USC.
right, and so to play at Santa Barbara, like you have to be a pretty good golfer, and that's not a short amount of time to like get to that
Right.
level at a very difficult thing. So I'd love to hear your point of like, what do you think attributed to that success? Because you hear a lot of, oh, it's mastery, 10,000 hours at something, you can get very good at it. I'm always convinced there is people have an inherent knack or natural ability for it. So I'd love to hear from your point of view. How do you think you were able to progress a game and become successful to the point where you were able to play in college in such a short amount of time?
I think it was just commitment from day one. Honestly, I think
Yeah,
it was just 100% because part of, I mean, I don't want to get into like the nitty gritties of golf, but a lot of golf is like unlearning some bad habits that you've developed over the years. And
right,
if
Sure.
you can, it's almost this weird thing where if you can start at a clean slate with proper kind of guidance and full commitment, your ability to exponentially get better can can actually really help versus if you were to spend, let's say, 7 years doing something incorrectly, and you have to kind of unwind 7 years of doing something a certain way
right,
in order to get over this hump to get to the next level. I think is one part of it, and then I think the other part is probably mental because the game is extremely mental.
Yep.
It's one of those solo sports, right? It's like tennis. Like you're out there, you're on your own, and you've got to be able to, you know, be mentally strong within yourself in order to kind of improve, get to the next level, and compete and all that good stuff. So
yeah, yeah,
I'd say it's probably a combination of those two things.
no, no,
Um,
yeah, great.
yeah.
Love that answer. And then was the product of moving to USC Business School like my situation where I played tennis in a D2 school for Penn, so it was a branch campus of Penn State. And then, had fun the season that I played tennis, but quickly realized I'm no Pete Sampras or Andre Agassi. Probably should concentrate on studies because I'm just never going to be at that level. That was my scenario. Kind of what was your scenario that um, got you to the point where you're like, yeah, I'm going to concentrate on studies and not so much this golf thing.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a similar story. I think when I got there, I was like, you know, I thought I was good at golf, and then there's like obviously levels to everything, and
Yeah.
I I just didn't. it's weird when you go to play college for anything. Like if you don't think you're going to be a pro after that 4 years, I don't think you should be playing.
Right.
That's kind of like my mentality. Some people, obviously, they have different scenarios where if someone's paying you to go to the school there, they may need to stay all 4 years to, um, you know, stay enrolled and all that. But
Right.
I just did not see myself becoming a pro. I mean, I've got a buddy who did go pro, and it's 7 years later. He's bounced. He's gone up to the PGA Tour. He's lost his card. He's gone to a tour below. Came back. I mean, it's a grind going through all that, and it's kind of like the startup story. You only see the PGA Tour pros who are there every week on TV.
Right.
But the
Yep.
reality is, if you don't make that cut, which is very small relative to the whole world, right? It's like there's only 125 people that get to come back each year. Otherwise, it's kind of a dogfight. So
Yeah.
I just saw that as a pretty daunting task to want to pursue for the rest of my life. So and Santa Barbara didn't have a business school. I always was attracted to business and things like that. So that was kind of like the thought process behind the move. So
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and I I totally agree with you. And I think the competitive athlete in you, uh, you fully believe. You go into the college situation, you're like, I'm good enough, I can beat anybody, and then you see the person that hits the 130-mile-an-hour serve, and you're like, I can't even see that ball go by me, much less put my racket on that serve. I am not that good. And you have
yeah,
that moment and
yeah,
you're like, well, shit, I might as well figure out what I want to do with my life.
yeah. Actually, it's funny. There's like a top. I think he might have been like top 5 in the world
Yeah.
in the official golf rankings, and he's still like currently. His name's Patrick Cantlay.
Yep.
If you follow golf,
Yes.
he went to the rival high school with me.
Okay.
So this was a guy who was like putting the bar up, right? This was like, oh, that's what I am not that. It was very
Yeah.
clear, even at high school, like this guy was, it's like, like probably if you played against Tiger Woods growing up, it's like he's just a different player.
Right.
And it's interesting to see now that he's literally one of the best golfers in the world, that at least that was verified in my mind. I was like, okay, that was at least that was a pro. And I was like, okay, I'm definitely not that guy. He's
Right.
definitely much better than I am. So
Yeah.
it kind of full circle. And but yeah, it's interesting.
It's validation in your life decisions as to probably not be a golfer.
Yes.
But no, that's funny. Maddie, any questions
Yeah.
before we move on?
So let's talk about that. So for unwinding that, sorry for another kind of like philosophical question here, but you went through golf, you succeeded at a high level, you got to college, you realized I don't think I can compete on a pro level, and so you made a pivot, right?
Yes.
But like you said, very few make it to a pro level. That part we know, right? It's just what do you think separates the people that have what it is and don't have what it is to go to that next level? That's my first part of this question.
Ooh, that's a great question.
I actually think it has to come down to like a level of maturity. I
Mm,
think the guys that succeed in their early careers have like a certain level of awareness and maturity about their game, and they're able to understand what they do well, what they don't do well, and that's how they're able to manage it and essentially be able to beat these guys, because you got to know what you're good at, you got to know what you're not good at, you got to play to your strengths, um, and then you've got to mentally believe in yourself, because
Hmm.
if you don't believe in yourself, there's 100 guys that do. So
Okay.
I think
No,
over the course of time, I don't think it's as much skill. Like a lot of these guys, if you go play 18 holes with them, they're all going to shoot around the same score. But then when you go play a tournament,
yeah.
that's when things start getting like, that's when it starts varying, right?
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
so at the common denominator is that mentally things have changed in their mind about how things are playing out now. So I think
interesting.
It's very mental at like a certain level, and obviously you have some like phenoms that can hit the ball a
Sure.
country mile. And I'm actually 6'4", so I actually swing it as fast as Dustin Johnson, to put it in perspective. So I can hit it far, but that doesn't necessarily equate if you don't
Right.
have all the rest of your game.
Right.
So,
Right.
but yeah, I think it's very mental when it gets to the upper echelons of the sport.
Okay. And okay, so then part two of this question is so we know that of all the people playing golf, for example, in the high school level, fewer will make it to college and significantly fewer will make it to pro, right? So there's a risk factor there. And the reason I'm asking and what separates it is because you went into the startup world, right? And what you witnessed was a startup that did not work out. Do you think that the startups that make it through that same type of competitive environment, do you think that what separates the ones that tend to make it there versus the ones that don't have similar criteria?
I think so. I think there are some external factors at play,
Sure.
like any startup. I think it's
Hmm.
easier when there's tailwinds behind you. I
Hmm.
think it's difficult, like in a condition now. Like I think it's harder than it was 12 months ago, right? To
Hmm.
do anything
Hmm.
in the startup world. But I don't know. Those are kind of. But you could also argue that there's less people, competing now in
Sure.
the startup space. So it
Right.
all it all balances itself out. So
Yeah.
So, because where I'm getting to with this is and this is something for you to also kind of steep on for a little bit when we get to the next part. But you've been in these situations several times now where there are few that make it, right? Golf, startups, music industry, and now you're in Web3. And what I'm curious is that based on the things you've learned, do you feel like you have a good grasp on what it takes to separate yourself on the Web3 level? Because many will try, right? But not everybody's going to end up being Yuga Labs, right? And so, what is it that it has? And when we dive into that, I want to revisit this question and talk to you about has that something you've incorporated or something you've thought about? Is that fair?
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I love that
Perfect. I
question.
like
I
it.
actually,
I like it.
and back to your point about the startups, though, what you were saying, Michael, is, um, I do agree with you and your point that, uh, the Uber, for instance, you used that. The whatever the guy's name is, the original CEO who thought up of the idea, his conviction to his idea that it was gonna work when he had everyone in the world telling him no, getting sued, lawsuits, everything, but he did whatever it took to make that company succeed, is kind of back to your quote on the mindset, right? These top echelon golfers, they're they're just convinced there's no room for failure and they're the best and they will be the best, and that mental edge is what just makes them so great. uh, and I think you can equate that to kind of the startup world for the most successful ones, because yes, they have all the right market conditions, they have a product market fit, but ultimately they have a leader that is just dead set on making that damn thing work, right?
Yep, I would agree.
Love
Definitely.
it. One quick question for you. So you stayed in SoCal. You stayed there for college, you stayed there for work. Is it is just as simple as it's what Mike always says is that it's heaven on earth. It's just a beautiful place. Is it just as simple as there's no reason to leave SoCal once you're there? Or was there something that kept you there?
I I think it's changed. I think like even as early as like maybe last year, I had the realization. I think probably ages 22 to 26 or 7, I would have argued I probably should have got out and came back. But
Uh-huh.
now I think someone even posted this on Twitter that I read, but it was something along the lines of, someone asked someone how many times they see their family a year, and the guy said one time. And then the guy's response to the other guy was like, "Oh, you're going to see your parents like 23 more times before they die." And it was this like stark moment of realization that this person had, that he realized like how much he valued his time with his family and seeing them,
Mhm.
and saying that I'm only going to see him one time a year was just like it was one of those sobering moments for him. And when I read that, it honestly shifted my mindset towards that outlook. And my parents live in Southern California. They're probably not going to move. I very much want to stay near them,
Mhm.
for the rest of their lives at least. And being able to be there and be present is something I value very highly. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where my answer lies in terms of like staying here, at least from this point forward. I would have wanted to at least live in a different place. I think probably, you know, the window in my mind has kind of come and gone, but I also can't
Okay.
complain. It's pretty nice over here.
Right, right.
Can't
Yeah, I
complain.
got it.
Also, the
Got it.
other side to it is it is it's a great place to live. I'm very fortunate and feel very grateful that I've got to spend the majority of my life here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's and again, you've known this is all you've known. It's different for me, who's only been here for about 6 years. That's known nothing but the East Coast, right? It's just different for me. And all my family's freezing their ass off right now, and I walked around in t-shirts and shorts today, and it was beautiful and sunny. Like that makes me happy. And then on top of it, the beach, being close to the beach, is just makes me excited as well. There's something that soothes my soul and mind when I see the waves crash. So that is always helpful to me. But I want to move on. I mean, this has been great. Thank you so much for just kind of giving us some insight into how you think, why you think the way you think. I think we think this is so critical for people that are interested in getting into your project, to really humanize you and let you know that you went to USC, you played golf at a high level, you're open to taking risks, and now we're kind of into the Web3 world. So really Star Wars episode 2 is what we call, is like you started to get there, and when I kind of interjected, but yeah, take us through really in detail, you finding NFTs up to okay, it's time to pull the trigger, I want to start my own project. Really interested to hear that.
Sure. Um, so I think there's two train tracks in my mind. Think about this, and it goes back to one. I'm on this commercial real estate track
Yeah.
that's concurrently going with my increasing interest in NFTs. So, kind of circling back, I think the summer of NFT summer was when obviously, just like everyone, tried to get in on as many projects as I could get my hands on. Everything was kind of selling out like crazy. Everything
Mm-hmm.
was like, you couldn't, I remember I went to the first ever CyberCon's LA, actually ever IRL event in
Oh,
the world
really?
in LA. I remember this guy named, what was his name? What, El Chapo put it on. And I remember going there, and that was my first kind of like realization that people are like in the real world are like, behind these images, coming to meet each other. I remember this guy came up with like his like chain, and he was saying like, I have five cool cats. It was just like it was a whole scene.
Right.
And I do remember that was like the moment for me where I was like, oh, okay, this is like kind of real, and this is like, not just this online thing. There's actually people here. LA's kind of, potentially could be like a hub for all this stuff. And, you know, where this, I guess the tide started shifting for me was that fall. I think the project that I like first went like full bore 100% in was Neo Tokyo. It's
Yes.
like a crypto gaming project by a couple of really big influencers. They
Mm-hmm.
had this like wild goose chase for trying to figure out how to get into essentially the top 2000, which would then get their quote unquote Neo Tokyo identities.
Yep.
And they had this whole, I mean, this was like, when everyone was still like fresh to the scene. So there was probably, they have like probably a million people between both of their videos, all seeing the same stuff, and everyone was trying to figure out all these riddles and starting these little sub Discord communities to piece everything together. And then I remember, you know, you essentially had to go through like 5 different checkpoints, and then like when you, I guess this was early, but like you had to like go into the contract to actually mint your identity the first time. And it was just like this whole experience for me that I was going through. And it was like, it felt like I was in like Ready Player One meets like
Yes.
it was just a very fun experience from a just like the gamification, the community building, the just like I like the techie kind of like cyberpunk kind of world that they were creating. And it was also, I felt like probably at that time everyone was drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit as well. So it was just like a
Mm-hmm.
concoction of all that. Um, but it was at that moment I was like, I really was like, I'm bought into the community. I think that was like the first time I was like, okay, wow, I'm so in here. Like I'm in this 2000. Like this is it. Like I'm gonna be about whatever this community is about, essentially. And I went through they had like a multi-drop kind of thing where you like essentially got all your parts, and there's this whole everything was like this, like I said, Ready Player One esque, like kind of riddle meets game performance to get your, next card or next NFT. And once you kind of collected everything, then you put everything together to get your like citizen, so to speak. And that was like a 3-4 month process. But
Mm.
and I think that probably leads us to like January. And I mean, these things were going at one point. I mean, looking back on it now, I think they were like, I mean, they were like $200,000 at one point. I'm pretty
Were
sure.
they? What
Depending
ETH
on which
was
one
that?
you had. Depending on what you had. I mean, they were like
So they were 10,
they were like
30,
north of 50. Some
50.
were selling. Yeah, yeah, I swear.
Shit, dog. Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess
So
I
they
guess
were.
that needed to be up there. That's like
Yeah.
100 ETH.
Yep.
Oof.
There's 100 each sale
Oof.
on some of these. So
Dude.
it was like that was the.
And
But
so you
the
got
funniest
one?
part,
You did the whole riddle, you got one?
did,
I remember the
did the whole
craze.
riddle. Yeah, 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 did the whole riddle, got one. There's like a stat, like basically nobody sold. It was like such a small percentage of the 2000, because what they had done is that the bot, I mean, to have been in that group was your buy-in had to be so large,
Yeah.
like from a mental commitment and all that stuff. Like you
Yeah.
didn't want to let it go. So
Mm.
it was really, I mean, everyone, I mean, it's obviously a strong community, but it was an interesting experiment, honestly. So, but I think throughout that process, it also kind of like, you know, brought the idea to my mind, like, I can do this. I can be someone who makes my own project and create this experience as well.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's where the turn of the new year happened, which is, shoot, it's like 11 months ago now.
Yeah.
Seems like ages ago, but that's kind of where I pivoted the first time. And you know essentially what happened was I was thinking about starting my own project. The guy who originally had told me about NFTs wanted to do his own project, and then we actually connected with the guy who works for a gaming studio in Los Angeles. And he's like kind of similar age and had worked in gaming for like 7 years. And he had also, obviously, he's watching from afar. I've been in this Neo Tokyo gaming group. He is
Right.
part of like an actual gaming studio. Is like, let's do a project. And that was kind of like the moment where it turned into like a leap of faith. Like I'm done doing the real estate thing. Like it's ran its course. I don't have any interest in that. This thing that I'm like so engaged with every day, every spare moment I have is being spent towards this, is like where I want to spend my energy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we have this team that's coming together. I actually, the guy from the gaming company, I didn't know too well, but I had met him through a mutual friend, and we connected initially, and it was great. And you know, we started that project, which actually never minted. and it ran the course through like, I'd say like late March. So this
Okay.
was probably like, we're talking late January to late March, that window. We tried to launch a project. And the long story short on that was it goes back to like another startup thing, but like just the founders of the project being on the same page
Oh,
and wanting the same things and having your incentives aligned and being in alignment on all those things. And I think, that played its course over the course of months. And I think I made a mistake as a, founding person in a group that I didn't vet everyone a little bit more on why they're trying to be here and
yes.
what their motives were. How do you work? What happens if this happens? X, Y, Z, because all these things are going to happen. You don't know, but when they do, everyone starts kind of like, you either get stronger or it can unravel very quickly.
Right.
And like as simple as like sometimes how many projects get published a day, right? It would like each one still needs to go through the like there's a team that comes together, they agree on everything, they go through with everything, right?
Right.
So I just that ran its course, and it didn't come to life, and essentially everyone kind of split ways,
Yeah.
and that kind of left me in a position where I still wanted to do a project. I mean, that was my intention when I started. I didn't want to just, stop after this one try. Like that wasn't my intention at all.
Right.
Uh, which is actually where this project started. So this actually started, I know it's almost December, crazy enough, but this project actually started in like April
Yeah.
of this year.
Awesome.
And I was still riding the crypto gaming wave. Probably, if you were to do the arc, it was like Neo Tokyo, this gaming project that I tried to do with the gaming studio guy. And then there was actually, it's so funny saying this now, but there's the NFT world's like grassroots gaming wave that was happening
Yes.
at that
Yes.
period of time. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not a studio level gamer, but this is an amazing way for me to, you know, try this out, get my foot in the door,
Right.
and like build like my own gaming community. So I think I did what a lot of projects did at that time, which was like get a Minecraft world built, go into the server, talk to them about the design. I mean, I still have it,
Right.
um, and I like designing that, working, and getting your skills on like talking with these people and developing the game a little bit. Like I had like a beta running, and we had marketed the project, I'd say, with the same cowboy portion of this art. So
Yeah.
it was actually originally called Wild Westerners,
Uh-huh.
and it was just a Western themed project with this whole game component that was going to be on NFT Worlds. And um, come like late May, obviously, we were like full steam ahead. Everything was going well. There's a lot of people in our Discord. We were doing really fun stuff in the Discord. I, it was actually myself and one of my friends from the area that I went to school with were doing this venture,
Yeah.
and I mean, we were having a blast in the Discord. We actually set up like a jail cell where people that we found to be bad actors were like thrown in. It was like actually felt like the Wild West a little bit.
Nice.
Um, and we had like a town hall and all this stuff, and it was like a really fun time. But when the sell off came in late May,
Uh-huh.
everyone kind of like that was the first time I was like, oh whoa, like is anyone alive? It was like a very visceral, like noticeable, just like if there was 1,000 people, it felt like there was 10.
Oh yeah,
And
dude. Oh yeah.
uh, that was like okay, people are like, taking chips off the table, people are leaving. Here comes the free mint meta, right? Like that's when that kicked off.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, like myself, I was like, I mean, I honestly, this was even before the NFT Worlds Microsoft issue, but
Yeah, the
the
Mojang situation.
Mojang situation happened, I think I want to say late June, but I looked at my project, and I was like, I started to think long term, because this was all like essentially like it felt like collapsing under your feet, and I wanted to kind of take a step back and assess things. So rather than kind of like push full steam ahead
Yeah.
and like, hey, let's just mint the project and figure it out, I took a step back and just thought to myself, like, it was like, what do I think is going to be here in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years?
Right.
And it forced me to kind of reshift my thinking, which ended up reshifting the strategy, which meant holding off on minting and holding off on all like the marketing efforts, and essentially retooling the project and pivoting what the core focus was.
Right.
So,
And
like, since then, go ahead.
so real quick, now, I think that was a solid episode too. Fascinating. And I have a couple questions. Maddie, you might have a couple more, but the biggest one is, so we talked about your childhood, and one of the themes that came out of that was um, being persistent, right? Not giving up, and just accountability for whatever you're trying to do. Yet again, you go through a whirlwind like we all did in the NFT space, but you actually took it upon yourself to create a project. One failed because of the founders, which, by the way, I'm glad you brought that up. Believe it or not, you can go to school for entrepreneurship, and I did. I got my master's in tech and entrepreneurship at Maryland, and one of my professors was a venture startup guy, and he said, out of everything, when he hears people pitch startups, number one thing is the founding team. If he can't believe in them and they're not all aligned, it's game over, right? So it was interesting to hear you say that. It's just another kind of proof of concept there. But what I'm really getting at and interested at is, yet again, you hit multiple more failures and roadblocks. What
Mhm.
in the frame of Web3, and in particular this space, keeps you going? Because most people at your point that have been through what you just described would have said, screw this, I'm out.
Yeah, I think there's a part of just wanting this to work. So there is, I don't know if like that's an ego component or a hyper motivation component of just, I set my mind to it, and I just, a fair try for me is probably more than other people's fair try. So I'm still
Oh,
trying to give it my honest effort.
right.
Um, so I'd say that's probably the core thing. And then the second thing is, I still believe in what this space means, and I do believe in the idea of digital ownership on a holistic level.
Yeah.
I see from just a philosophical and macro picture, like, we are renters on the internet currently. I do think there's a world where we have ownership, there's interoperability, and it may not be the metaverse that we're looking at today, but it could be a version of that, in which case this technology lends itself very well to interacting with each other there.
Right.
And I think we're on our way there. It's part of a natural progress, like anything, or
Hmm.
a process where it has to go through, you know, the ideas aren't robust, everyone's going euphoric, and it has to go through its cycles of innovation.
Yeah.
Um, but I think eventually, I, I wasn't like alive during like, or I was alive, but I wasn't like aware of what the internet was doing at that time. But I don't think anyone that was sitting there saying what the internet was back in 1990, fast forward to even 2000, could
Right.
even realize what happened.
Right.
You just, they're just, once you get to like the second or third orders of magnitude on any idea, I don't think you can actually understand what's going to happen.
Right.
So I think there's an element of me believing that this, that is going to be another version of this, where you just don't understand where this is going to go and the implications of it, because it's just, it's out of our comprehension, so to speak.
Yeah.
But
No.
once the tipping point happens, which you could argue, if you want to go down like the super metaverse like network of virtual worlds thing. Once the cost gets low enough and the technology gets scalable enough, then you've got a majority of the population that may opt to living in the metaverse for a higher entertainment experience than their actual life.
Yeah.
I don't know, but there'll be a tipping point where this starts getting like starts veering the other direction. If you look at the gaming, which is the closest thing to like a metaverse, those numbers in terms of like compound growth year over year in terms of market is more than all the entertainment industry combined. If
Right.
you were to look at it like statistically, so it's like people are opting for these kind of virtual worlds. I think it's just a matter of time. I think technology, Moore's law, it's compounding. Eventually, we
Yeah.
won't understand how fast it's happening. But like even you talk about today in like a super inflationary environment, the macro of that is we're actually in a super deflationary environment through technology. Technology is allowing you to get the most out of your dollar. The cell phone that all of us have in our hands used to be a $10,000 handheld phone that you had to pay every hour to pay like whatever,
Yeah.
$1,000 an hour. Now you can run a business from your phone, right? Like it's getting to the point where this technology will eventually, I think, outpace everything. At that point, you know, we'll, I don't even know where we started, but
Yeah.
going
No.
back to like where the
This is fascinating. This is why we're here.
where yeah, and this is what I kind of believe, and I do believe in that future. And I don't even think we really talked about it, but I am a big gamer. Like my background, I used to love playing video games. So I think there's a through line in that. Like I know what it's like to be invested into a game. Like I played RuneScape.
Yeah.
Those games where like there's a world. You gotta earn you gotta get your skills up to get your thing. You go on quests. Like it's a very immersive thing, and I think it's a little slice of what the world could be um, for people. So people enjoy that as part of their
Yeah.
lives more and more. So
Dude, real quick before Maddie goes, Anthony, he was on our show. He's, I'm sure you remember the craze of Primate Planet, which is now Prime Planet, I think. Community member who took the project over. Huge RuneScape guy. The more that we have people on the show, it's amazing to me the amount of people that have played RuneScape. And we actually had a
Yeah.
whole conversation about how RuneScape taught him life skills. It's fascinating.
Yep.
I'm sure, and
Go,
it's kind of
go
life
ahead.
feels like a game sometimes.
Right. Absolutely.
So it's like
Absolutely.
Well, here's the thing. It's games are starting to imitate life better, right?
sure,
So, because what he was talking about was, for example, he's getting lessons in economics because of the in-game exchange currency system that was there, and it's like it is kind of crazy how there are whole economies that grow digitally. You
Right.
know what I mean? In any, by the way, in any of these big like MMORPGs, you know, there are certain items that are might be rare or hard to farm, and people find ways to monetize it, even if it's not the item itself. Mike and I, when we were playing Elder Scrolls, what blew me away was we befriended this guy who was very, very good, and he got in this basically what were they called, clans, Mike, guilds? I don't know, but basically
Guilds.
they ran trials.
Yeah, there are
Like
trial
specifically,
guilds. Trial
yeah,
guilds.
trial guilds. And these people were so good that the same group of people would get on, and what they would do is they would just carry somebody who had real money in life to say, I want to get this, whatever, pick your item, right? But the only way to do it is to do this insanely hard task in the game. So these people, what they were doing was saying, well, we're all insanely good at it. We'll carry you through it for money. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? It's like some
wow,
of these people are very young and they've learned supply demand. At the end of the day, they've learned if I have a skill or a commodity that's in demand, that's difficult to obtain, someone will pay me for it and I can monetize it.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that like this is all real world lessons. See, I learned it growing up because I mowed people's lawns. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's like I would much rather have been playing video games to learn that lesson, is what I'm saying. And I think it's interesting that we're at that pace. I'll tell you another area, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, Michael, are because you say video games make sense, but let me tell you something I keep seeing. Like people keep sending me messages. Have you seen this? Have you seen this? Have you seen the number of digital workplaces that are popping up? And here's what I mean. A friend of mine you're in commercial real estate. Maybe you've heard of EXP. I don't know. Maybe you haven't. Um, but they sell houses and do real estate through EXP. And what I think is fantastic is what they have done is, and it wasn't even as a result of the pandemic. They were already moving this direction. However, because the pandemic still made them basically allowed to conduct business like they were already, which was you log in, and just like when I logged into Elder Scrolls and I'm in my character and I'd walk around, Tamriel, they would walk in and they had this like virtual, basically like home office, not home, I'm sorry, virtual corporate office. And it had different meeting rooms and whatnot. And you would just move around. It kind of looked like a little Wii avatar. And you would walk around and you could interact. You could talk to brokers. You could talk to other agents. They would run presentations. And you would just go around. And it was like if you had to talk to, for example, a broker from a specific state because you have a question, you would go to that person. You would take a number and wait in a digital line in a digital metaverse, and then when they'd call you, you'd be talking to that person's avatar, but you're really talking just like we are right now,
Right.
right? And that's how you do this.
Interesting.
And and I'm sitting there going, they created a metaverse, but it's just an office. And I'm thinking, wow. And I've heard more and more people, um, what's happening is like big companies, it's going to be the big ones that can afford it to start, are basically paying developers to create this same type of environment. And in the same way that right now I mean, think about it. 20 years ago, the idea of using um, instant messenger at work was frowned upon, right? You got in trouble if you were using instant messenger. But now we just call it Microsoft Teams, and that's what you use, right, Mike? I mean, that's just like
Yeah.
that's the thing. And so,
Absolutely. I mean,
um,
that's Facebook just came out with their Pro Oculus that's like 1,600 bucks, and that is the goal, right? Is to make the
yep.
virtual workplace work.
Yeah.
And so
Uh,
the only reason I mentioned is because yes, all three of us are gamers, and of course, gaming has a very obvious um, place
use
when it comes to
case.
metaverses and Web3. There's just it's like a round hole, round peg type thing. But it's interesting to see the corporate environment start to make a change, and just like you start getting some of these Fortune 10, Fortune 50 companies on board on like their own metaverses, right? And then when you start thinking that their metaverses can interact with others, and that's how B2B business can be conducted, you do kind of start talking about the oasis at that point. So, what are your thoughts?
I think it's definitely interesting. I'm wondering what will be the domino effect, or who's going to start getting the ball rolling in that direction in a big way. Obviously, Zuckerberg, I don't, is he even at the company anymore? Whenever he's
Oh,
leaving, but
he's still there. He's
yeah, I
still
mean,
there.
I watched like the All In podcast. I don't know if you guys watch that with
Yeah.
some guys. They're like, it's a great podcast for like entrepreneurship and business and geopolitics and things like that. But
Hmm.
they were outlining how much investment that Facebook is putting into virtual worlds and
Yeah.
Oculus and the amount of development. And it's insane relative to like what's been put in terms of like capital allocation. It was like on par or more than on like a adjusted basis to like the Apollo missions in terms of like
Wow.
it
Yeah,
was. I'll try and find it and send it to you guys
Yeah.
after, but they're investing a heavy amount.
yeah,
I mean, shit,
So
man, they changed the name of their company. That's a pretty big
yeah,
deal.
yeah.
yeah.
So something will come of it. Now I don't know what, like they're going to be the ones to create something that can be used. Hopefully, if they spend, I think it's $10 billion every year or something like that.
Right.
Um,
Jeez.
or 4 billion every quarter for 10 years. It's something absurd where they're spending like $250 billion on this like virtual world
Yeah.
venture. So I
Or
don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
or they're underpaying a really good software engineer that's going to leave that company and then actually start the real thing.
Sure.
But it's one of those two
Well,
things that seem to happen historically.
yeah. I don't know if like also like some ventures lend itself well to capital and some do not. I think
Yeah.
this one is a very capital intensive thing and you do need money to go after some this big of a goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is actually a small group of players that can execute this,
Yeah.
truthfully.
Right. Good call.
Yeah.
Um, so, but I do think before that, we're going to see probably AR have a prolific um, moment. I think
100%.
I think
100%.
the thesis in my head is we've turned into an attention economy, as you guys
Hmm.
know.
Yep.
Attention is the new currency. Oil used to be what the world used to revolve itself around. Now you have people that have 24 hours a day, and how can you monetize every waking second?
Yep.
And I see AR as the ability, good or bad, but the ability to capture and essentially alter the perspective of which someone lives their life
Yeah.
through constant attention grabbing information. So that to me, before even AR or VR, makes a ton of sense. Again, it lends itself to everything we've talked about tangentially,
Yeah.
and I think that's where the next wave comes. I know, there's some big companies that are going to produce AR stuff and have some really good big things in the pipeline. So, but yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
100% agree with you on that. There was, I still can't, I probably didn't find it, but there are a group of MIT students back in the day. They created this really cool AR video called Sight. And the whole concept of the video was what would a truly integrated, not metaverse, but AR society look like if you could put all of the technology in a contact lens, kind of like I think they did an episode on Black Mirror, where you're like, for instance, you go out on a date and in real time, the girl's Facebook feed is filtering it and you're looking at her likes and, all of these like very intimate details about this girl as you're talking to her in real time. And then the guy goes home and his apartment is literally a white room with, a handful of pieces of furniture. And then next thing you know, he's skydiving and, rocking on his stomach on his carpet. Like that is kind of the in between, right? And it'll be very
So
interesting to see how that unfolds.
yeah. So I'm gonna be that guy and ask it, right? So can we do it? Probably. I agree with you. With enough funding, I think we can do it. I'm just gonna go a little Cyberdyne Systems here, rolling it back to Terminator 2. Should we do it?
Yeah, I
And I'm only
know.
saying it because even in fantasy, in novels, and I'm saying back, I mean, think about this like Time Machine. You're talking like old school novels all the way up to now modern stuff. Has there ever been a situation where this goes too far and it's benefited society? Just saying that. Just saying. Maybe we
I
should
don't
have the
know.
question, should we get to that part? Because I don't know what a complete artificial reality. I don't know if that's like, does that help us? Maybe
It's
not.
a
What do y'all think?
it's a great question.
That is a great question. I don't. It's. I would. Yeah. Oh man.
Okay, well, when you get woken up from your pod by Morpheus, just remember this conversation.
I definitely
You
will.
definitely probably won't be able to remember this conversation.
I know, right?
I tell Matt all the time, I was like, there's really two outcomes of all of this, and it's whether you want to believe in Skynet or the Matrix, because that's where we're going.
Yeah.
They
That's
always
funny.
say, what you see in movies eventually become reality.
Oh,
So
jeez. It's
I
insane.
bet, dude, I remember vividly when we were little and like Total Recall, and you were like, holy shit, video boards in a mall. Like, we'll never see that. And like, that is well over decades past at this point.
Yeah,
So, yeah, man,
yeah.
it's going to be a wild world. Any other questions before we move on to the project? Because I just had to
No, let's
interject
do it.
because
Yes,
you had
yes.
a lot of really interesting things there to say about your NFT journey. So let's move on, man. Let's get to, you've gone through these ups and downs, and now you're like, I am persistent. I am not giving up. I want to do this the right way, which brings us to the Wilders and how we've gone from NFT worlds to what we're currently looking at on screen and what you're going to talk about.
Sure. And yeah, I'll just kind of pick up where I left off on like the, I guess, market crash of May,
Yeah.
late May, and
Yep.
where everything kind of like the water came out from the sea.
Yeah.
And, I took a long look at the project and I wanted to, again, build something for the long term and also do something that I'm proud of. There was an element of pride to it that I wanted to do on this next kind of chapter. So the focus really came down to like what I think makes a project last, and I think it always will come down to storytelling for I'd say 90% of the brands that are always here
Yes.
or throughout the world with that, including this space and outside of the space. It's how you communicate, you know, in long form to your, community members, audience, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of the genesis of the new project where I wanted to revolve everything around. So, it changed even from the team construction. We brought on a writer to, sit down, start building the world itself and wanting to build the background before we even started the next chapter. And, that's part of the idea that if you look at franchises today, they do an excellent job, or at least the ones that have longevity do an excellent job on world building. And what I mean by that is they build worlds that, in and of itself, are interesting outside of the characters. So
Oh,
I'll give
okay.
two example. I'll give you two examples. One is not, and one is. One would be like if you took Rocky. It's a boxer in Philadelphia, but if you took Rocky, the character, outside of Philadelphia, you just have Philadelphia. So there is no Rocky story without Rocky. It is tied to the character of Rocky.
Right.
Whereas if you have Star Wars and you took out Darth Vader from the world, you could still have your story of the bounty hunter, right? There's a world that has a background that still allows flexibility in terms of storytelling and different um, avenues in which to continually tell exciting stories. So that concept is kind of something called transmedia IP. It's something that, like Marvel would be the best example of this, right? They have a bunch of comics that are all based on these stories that now have been obviously comprised into these movies that have all individually told smaller stories and smaller character arcs. But there's this overarching story that's constantly being told in which, they come together and the worlds collide. And there's this whole, obviously, the Avengers and things like that. My sister actually works for Marvel. I actually got
Oh,
the
cool.
pleasure of going to Avengers Endgame, which was a really, really cool experience.
No, that's awesome.
And that's like I guess, like, to put it the entertainment pinnacle is that moment, right? If you guys have seen
Yeah,
the movie,
Yeah.
when
for sure.
everyone, I mean, it's one thing to see it on the screen, but then actually being there, you've got everyone and everyone's entire cast from all their individual
Yeah.
movies there, right? You start to see like, oh, this is like this huge, huge moment where
Mm-hmm.
23 individual kind of like stories have been told that have all led into this moment.
Right.
Now, obviously, that's on the tippy high end, like the best you could do scale, right?
Yeah,
But the concept, I think you can still extrapolate and build into your own project, or at least what I want to do is build it into my own project. So that's kind of the framework in which the approach is coming from.
Right.
And then, so that's like, if I were to like conceptually describe it to you, that's like what the project is about. So everything that will go on from the point of the mint to the foreseeable future will be essentially integrating obviously the NFT collection itself, but also how these NFTs interact with different forms of media and how stories can be told and obviously tie back to the NFTs as well, um, that are kind of in a more engaging community focused way, with the idea that over time you're essentially creating a flywheel of entertainment content IP that is community driven, community built, but obviously, um, having that big picture in mind that we're going somewhere. So that's kind of the quick spiel on it. Another side note back to when I kind of like everything was going, haywire in the markets. It was also a moment for me where I wanted to, again, like I said, bring some creative energy and do something I was proud of, which kind of brought in the new element to the project that you see now, which is there's a GIF component that has this whole other side to it. That's kind of the wilder in itself. If you look at it, it's got a full animation. So that actually meant we brought on a whole animation studio to come and animate the entire collection.
Right.
There's like a whole element now of like, who are you? What's your like, wild side is what I would call it. And it's almost kind of a symbol for me on my own journey. I feel like sometimes I'm a little crazy doing all these things. Even you guys have alluded to it.
Right.
It's having that wild side. It's wanting to keep going. It's wanting to, embrace that part of yourself and it's okay to reveal that that's who you are.
Right.
So the animation studio came in and I think they've done a wonderful job. I think it's some of the most, I guess, like differentiated and variety filled collection in terms of animation I've seen in the space.
Yeah.
Typically, you see like very repetitive stuff, whereas if you know when you'll see all of them together, it's very different in terms of movement. It's very different in terms of the expression of what their alternative being are, and it will be the goal of that from an artistic perspective was I wanted to create more personality in a collection from a movement standpoint, and I think a lot of projects when they do the animations, I think they're missing the point a little bit sometimes, which is animations are supposed to, bring more life um, to the actual image. And trying to veer away from repetitiveness as much as we could was an effort to lean more into that ethos of what animation could be in the context of a generative collection.
Right. Yeah, and I love there's room to tell stories as to what these alter egos are. I do want to clarify one thing because I was a little confused about the Rocky analogy and the Marvel, because the story of Rocky is overcoming adversity and beating the odds, right? I'm
Yep.
assuming because that can happen anywhere. It doesn't have to be in Philly. I think what you're trying to get at is you're building this Wild West world to tell stories in. Is that am I interpreting that right?
I would say, I think maybe the way I would clarify it is that that comment was more in relationship to like world building and what that actually means in like a story
Gotcha.
world. So
Gotcha.
the world itself, like, if let's just say something's happening underneath the western town that opens like the gate to somewhere else, and
Right.
that these layers within the world itself outside of the characters create the canvas in which you can start telling more and more stories versus Philadelphia, right? There's some limitations there
Yes.
in terms of your capabilities of, like I said, there's a through line that things can keep like evolving over time. Not that the story of Rocky or anything in and of itself was not something you could use as a story, I
Right.
guess.
No. I understand what you just said is what I said, just in a different way. So I am clear on
Okay.
what you're
Okay.
doing. You're
Okay.
creating you're creating a multifaceted world which is going to be able to tell multitudes of stories through different lenses and characters, which, by the way, bravo to you. I've been preaching this for a long time. I have a brand marketing career of 20 plus years. And the one thing that this space has not done yet, and there have been glimmers of hope when it comes to someone like Neo Tokyo, right? For instance, like, oh, really cool riddle, gonna be, gonna build this world of citizens, but there's never any real follow through. And no one's effectively utilizing the mediums, which are long format YouTube, short format TikTok, Twitter, GIFs, like all of these different types of media content that we have access to, and utilizing them in a holistic, story driven way. So I dig what you're doing, man. It's not an easy thing to pull off, though.
Definitely. And I'll say, I think obviously there are tiers of execution and ways to start.
Hmm.
Obviously, the end goal can still be the end goal,
Yeah.
but I do think there's different ways of approaching it depending on where you are as a project. But I
Right.
still think you can fundamentally still do everything in just different. Obviously, look, we don't have $100 million to go make a movie, so that's not going to be the first order of business.
Right.
So, but there's ways to still get there and still build the foundation over time.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the thought process behind where we want to go, is first start, one step at a time
Yeah.
and take those necessary steps. And over time, it like everything good takes time, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not something, especially now, like there's no rush. You're not in a rush, right? The gold rush was last year.
Yeah.
So um, it's probably better to be more slower and methodical, and want to do it the right way, or at least the way you want to, or at least you see it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the approach with this project this time around.
No,
So
I love it. Maddie, any questions before I kind of move on?
No, you can move on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So I always like to get this in here. So awesome, thorough explanation. Let's condense that down to 2-3 minute max elevator pitch. Why me, as Mike G, am I spending my hard-earned money on the Wilders NFT, knowing there's 1,000 other out there?
So I'll first start off by myself, as someone wanting to be in the space for a very, very long time. I see myself um, pioneering this project and wanting to be extremely long term about my vision. I think that's the most important part, is wanting someone that wants to be here for the long term.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that there's tremendous risk out there right now in terms of wanting to spend your hard-earned money. And I understand that people, get worried sometimes that people will come and go with what they've spent on something, and they'll never ever see the end product of that. And I think it's a testament, luckily I've been on this show and have shared my background, but even within this project in and of itself, there's already been failures where a lot of people would have walked away. And that is a testament to me wanting to be here with this project for the long term. It's that I already haven't given up when a lot of people have. And I continue to come back every day, trying to chip away at building a project with the vision I have set forth in mind. And that would be, obviously, besides everything I talked about from a conceptual standpoint, but I would say that's the most important thing, if you were to look towards minting one of the NFTs.
And dude, I will give you props for this as well. You are the actually first, we've asked that question to a lot of people, and you're the first one that really didn't talk much about the project and actually talked about yourself and being there for the long term. And I think that's a fantastic answer. Not many people say that. And luckily, you have been able to tell your story, which has given people pretty tangible examples of how you haven't given up through adversity, whether it be, you know, your regular traditional business life and through the Web3 space. Maddie, any thoughts?
Yeah, so that was the why, right? Which is what Mikey asked, right? Why spend the hard-earned money? Here's my curious question though. If in terms of an elevator pitch, if I had just met you and you're exchanging pleasantries while we're both waiting for our Starbucks, order to arrive or whatever it might be, and you were telling me what it is you do in that kind of period of time, what would you say, like, what the project is? If I was a person who was from the outside, what would you say you're doing in the Web3 space with the Wilders project?
Sure. So the Wildest Project is essentially set out to build a creator-controlled and community-led entertainment brand that evokes adventure, creativity, and play. We want to take on kind of your traditional media that everyone consumes, and take control for ourselves and essentially cultivate creativity within the community to build our own world that we want to experience in an immersive fashion. And I think conceptually, like, we want to become a symbol for anyone with the courage to embrace their wild side and challenge the status quo. So, from a community standpoint, that's what we're going to be embodying, throughout our entire existence.
Love it. That's a
Okay.
good way to actually add to what I just asked. I appreciate that follow up, Maddie. Um,
Sure.
any other questions, Maddie, before I go to kind of more like what's happening with the project in the future?
Nope. Let's do it,
All
man. I'm
right,
ready.
cool. So believe it or not, we've been almost talking for an hour and 45 minutes at this point. Want to be cognizant of your time, although it's early for me, it's later for Maddie. He's on the East Coast. Uh, I'd love to hear kind of any pivots or surprises you've had over the last couple months. You know, I remember talking to you, seeing, working, knowing Nikki G as a buddy, seeing that you were starting to promote the project. You're active on Twitter now. I don't even, is the Discord open to the public? I don't even know if it is yet. Um,
Yeah, it should be. It's
okay.
just backslash the Wilders, and you
Okay.
should be able to join.
So the Discord's open to the public. What have the last couple months looked like? Have you had any pivots? Are you staying kind of true to your game plan? And then from there, what do the next 5 to 6 months look like for you? And obviously, don't go into any detail that you don't feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah, I think in terms of, I guess there's two parts of the question. The first
Yep.
part is past couple months. I don't think there's been anything the past couple months that have truly pivoted within the project. I think there's a lot of external things that have happened that
Yeah.
have affected a lot of projects, but internally the compass hasn't changed based on what externally has happened. So we're still, chugging along and wanting to get everything done. That obviously there's some stuff we need to get done up to mint, and then after mint, there's obviously the next kind of items that will unfold, so to speak, over the next, like you said, 3 to 6 months. Um, Without giving too much away, it will obviously revolve around first minting the characters,
Right.
that inhabit the world. And the next kind of follow up steps essentially are going to be, how do I say this without saying it? um, it will be very interactive, and individualistic. So there'll be things that you do with your characters that will progress yourself within a story, in which case your contributions and participation gets rewarded. And there'll be a innovative way I haven't seen done in the space where we drop, sequential mediums of content relating to that participation in the storyline that I'm referring to.
Okay.
So almost like you're playing a choose your own adventure, but also experiencing content, world building, storytelling, community building, together. So conceptually, that like back to what I was saying with the transmedia IP thing, I think that's kind of the flywheel effect, right? When you start building that engagement loop and interactiveness and immersiveness with the community. So,
All right. I love it. I love it. And so that's again story driven stuff. And I also admire you not sharing too much information because we've actually had a lot of people on this show as well. It says they will be very clear on one of the big mistakes they made, which was do not promise a ton of shit, especially in this space, because you will get skewered. Uh, that's just how this space works. Maddie, any other questions before I wrap this up, or were you good to go?
My before wrapping up, my only question is this: you said you wanted to be able to marinate on the answer. Why the risk driven ideals? Have you had a chance to think about that?
Ooh,
Anything pop up yet?
I forgot about that, to be
I
honest.
think I think it's the grand vision of what it could be and my, I guess, compellingness to go for it. Uh, the quote unquote risk also is associated with what's the greatest outcome too.
You got it.
And I think I see the greatest outcome as somewhat of an optimistic view on things. So I see that in people, I see that in things I want to pursue. And, I'd rather live a life trying to get, what I actually want than settle for something that's not exactly quite it. So I think that's kind of my answer to your, I guess, risk question.
No, that works.
See,
That's
and,
good.
and us navigating you through this conversation of the ebbs and flows, you came to an actually very concise, beautiful answer. I actually appreciate that insight, and I think it's spot on why that Maddie and I share similar thoughts as to why midlife. We like to say all the time, yeah, we love NFTs. We think we're interesting, but you'd be you'd be damn mistaken thinking that we're stopping at an NFT show. We're writing books, we're getting on stages, and we'll have multiple businesses. This is just the beginning for sure.
I love
Um,
it.
so yeah, man, we're almost to 2 hours. Unbelievable conversation. A lot of really interesting things. We like to wrap it up with two extra questions. I promise you, they are not that hard. Um, we
No
wouldn't uh, we
worries.
wouldn't ask you if they weren't. But the first one is we always like to give the courtesy to you. As do you have any questions for Maddie and I? Because we just peppered you with questions for 2 hours. And if you don't have any that come to mind, totally fine. We've had many people be like, no, I'm good.
I actually don't know your backstory, so I guess like the first question, I mean, we didn't do the intro on how you guys met, but would be curious to know how you guys met, how you guys got to, maybe you guys don't have to do how you guys got here, but what uh what spurred midlife crisis in terms of
Mm,
like what you guys, do you guys see have some sort of common event occur or common bonding experience occur? It sounds like you guys kind of were like living different lives and came together a
yeah.
little bit here.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I'd love to know kind of like you just said, like the future. What does your next year look like here at midlife?
Both fantastic questions. Maddie, I'm going to let you go first because I always answer this stuff first.
Sure. So, backstory. I mean, as you know, Mike and I known each other for a long time, and so we grew up together. I mean, we met at the fourth grade bus stop, so we've been friends for a long time. We went to school together. There was never a time where we weren't friends, and at least in contact. When our professionals career started, yeah, I mean, you get busy with life, and of course that happens. And then when he moved to the West Coast, you're just not going to see each other as much. As I said, what kind of brought things back was we had never stopped talking about that entrepreneurial idea. Mike had come up with hundreds of different ideas that he wanted to try to pursue. And there's all these different things. I had been building a business for a while. When I sold that, pandemic happened, what happened is we just reconnected honestly through video games. And you're talking, and you can't be an entrepreneur and talk to another entrepreneur and not talk about business ideas or recognize that something could be a business idea. And really what it came down to is and it's silly, but we saw so many people monetizing playing video games. We were thinking, well, we have nothing else to do, and who knows if the country's ever going to open up again. Let's give it let's give it a try, right? It doesn't cost anything. Wink, wink. We thought. Spoiler alert: it costs a lot more than we thought. But we started this process and just streaming video games, and it was fun. Made some great friends, and as Mike started learning more about NFTs, and of course, I mean, during that crazy, everything was just exploding with NFTs. Um, the interest was there. So we made a pivot, and that's what got us in the NFT space. And what got us in doing this is just, we love talking to people. We love having interesting conversations. It's something we both do naturally anyway, and we've been doing for a long time. And so with Mikey's flavor, my flavor, when it comes together, kind of doing these in-depth background, peeling away the layers of the onion and kind of what makes people tick, is just something that was a good fit for the space, right? I mean, the bottom line is we had already there were plenty of people that were shilling projects, plenty of people that would have, you can buy followers on Twitter and do things like that. And if it was just going to be sure run a contest here, that would be one thing. But we wanted to do is get to the heart of ultimately what a lot of people wanted to know, which is, do I want to be a part of this project or not? Right? Do I want to spend time here? Because it's a commitment. I mean, I remember the grind for Hate Beast, and it was like I'd never seen anything like that. I mean, people like quitting their jobs to try to get a spot for this thing. And I said, okay, if people are going to do this, they should probably know who's running it, because
Right.
that seemed to always be the mystery. And this whole idea that, ooh, it's super secret, none of the head team is doxxed, and that makes it mysterious. I thought that was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard of. I would never get a job and go work for a company. Could you imagine if the entire C-level suite of executives, they were just like, shh, we're not going to tell you, and that makes it mysterious? No, that's not how this works. Do you know what I'm saying? I want to know exactly who I'm working for. I want to know what makes them tick, what experience do they have, what credentials do they have. Because here's the thing, man, when you get on a plane, if you saw a pilot there and that pilot was, 17 years old with purple hair and looked up at you and was like, "This is going to be my first flight. I only got 30 logged hours." You'd be like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa. You don't want to get on that plane." You know what I'm
Right.
saying? It's, I want to get on with Captain Phillips or whatever the guy was that landed in the Hudson, like I want that dude that knows what's going on. And that's what everybody wants. And so how do we figure that out? And we decided, let's build a show around it. So that's, I'll stop there. And Mikey, if you want to keep going and what we think of the future, we can do that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was beautiful. I would add a couple things there. One of the other random things that is, well, it's not random. I think it's special. It's unique. I feel honored to have the opportunity. But Maddie and I, like, dude, we're in like fifth grade building, and you're younger than us, but like we were building. There was a movie called A Radio Flyer where they actually made like a flight out of what's the Red Wagon brand, Radio Flyer, right? That's the name of the
Is that what
brand.
it is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I shit you not. We had pictures of Maddie and I, 10 years old, thinking that we're gonna build a wagon that freaking flies. And I mean, this thing was fully functional, but we always dreamed big together when we were little. And one of the dreams
Yeah.
we had, and one of the things that's always been in the back of both of our minds, even though we've gone different ways and paths in life, is how freaking cool would it be to build wealth with your best buddy and travel the world? And that's really at the genesis of midlife crisis. Like, how do we do that? I don't, we're in the process of growing quickly because of this space, but it will take on many more forms in the future. And what's cool about that, the midlife crisis context, is we both went through, some pretty hard midlife crisis scenarios in our own different fashion. And I think what's special about it is I don't think we wouldn't have been able to do what we're doing 10 years ago. Like everything happened, for a reason. We learned, we came to the perspective and the mindsets. Like, listen, there's not many, good best friends, lifelong buddies that you can start a company with. That just is rare, right? But Maddie and I, life lessons, midlife crisis, everything we've learned and our mindsets are so aligned that I'm 1,000% comfortable being able to build this for the rest of my life and not have to worry about the stuff that you had to worry about when you first started your project, right?
Totally.
And that's been just super special to see. I mean, to be completely transparent, we had a third lifelong buddy that started this with us, and it didn't pan out because stupid things got in the way, and was just another testament to like why Maddie and I think chose each other when we decided to literally go on the journey of how do we answer the question, how do we build a business, build wealth together, travel the world, and not be tied to corporate America. Like that is the answer that we're ultimately trying to. That's the question that we're ultimately trying
and
to
help
answer.
people along the way, because
Right.
a lot of other people want to know how to get out of that.
Yeah, and not take the hundreds of thousands of dollars a month that some of these content creators and influencers are, and keeping it all for themselves. Yeah, we'll take care of our bills. We'll take some money for ourselves, but you're damn straight we're going to give a large amount of that money back to our community and grow, which kind of brings back into the like, what does the next year look like? And I think it's continuing to do this, build content, and really build our community. We understand the power of an online brand and community. And we want to grow our influence in the right way. We will never shill a project because we can make money. I think one of the things we are working on, and unfortunately I've had guests on the show before that have agreed to help mentor us in the sense of how do we monetize what we're doing a little bit better. We do a lot of things for free because we care about people. But I think I think 2023 is going to be a fantastic year for us because we're starting to get the recognition through the Web3 network. We have vehicles in place to monetize what we're doing. And that's just going to allow us to spend money to give back to our community via merch. Who knows? Maybe we do a one-off token or something that for appreciation, and then help pay for maybe travel and do events. But then on top of that, it's going to ultimately help us take money and put it back into the business. And we all know that that's ultimately how you continue to grow. Is you can't take all the money for yourself or give it all away. You still got to spend the money on your business to help grow. And that's what 2023 looks like. I think it's going to be a ton of fun and lots of opportunity ahead.
Awesome. I love it, guys.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Definitely looking forward to the future.
Oh yeah, man. You're part of the MLC fam now. So we're gonna win together
Let's
because
go.
that's ultimately really what it all boils down to. Be kind, pay it forward, win together. That's what we're really here to do. And then finally, last question. We ask this to everybody. I'm sure you've sat in hundreds of AMAs on Twitter at this point, done AMAs yourself. You've been on this show. We like to ask, how did the midlife crisis experience kind of match up to what you've seen or experienced in the space in the past?
I think it was a breath of fresh air, and I don't think I've ever. This was more of like a Joe Rogan podcast. This was like not your typical, you know, AMA or anything like that. It was almost like a self-reflection therapeutic thing for me in a way where
Yeah.
I got to reflect on parts of my life that I hadn't really thought of in a while, which was nice and refreshing. I think a lot of people just get caught up with, what's the hot project today, right?
Yeah.
Versus what's the backstory, who you are, and the more important things in life. So I really appreciate you guys taking 2 hours of your day to come and speak with me, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, man. And that's
Thank you.
you're not alone. We've had a lot of similar feedback. I think it just goes to help prove that our thoughts are more of this is needed, just not in Web3, just in life in general. We like to say as we get more connected in the metaverse and hide behind the social media profiles. Us, doing what we just did for the last 2 hours and getting to deeply know and understand people is going to be a lost art and is super critically important as we move forward in this crazy tech world. So I appreciate the kind thoughts, man. I'll let Maddie say his closing comments. I'll say mine, and then we'll call it a night, man.
Yeah, so two main points. The first is actually just came to me based on what you just said, Michael. When you were saying how you felt today, or how you felt today went, and the experience. And what I would say is this: is what you just described. That is actually what the Midlife Crisis podcast and what we do here. That's what our product is. If you really want to boil it down, our show is about the exact experience you just described, right? It's not supposed to be the AMA that everybody's used to. We want to help pull those things out because here's the thing: character's always going to be revealed. When people are telling their story, they learn things about themselves, they learn things about their project. People who want to be a part of their community learn things about the people that are putting it together. And that's always a good thing, right? When we get more light into those kind of darker cracks, it helps really reveal what's going on. And so, thank you for taking the time and being honest, and also being willing to say, I don't know sometimes, right? Because there's a lot of people that have this pressure to just answer something, even if it's wrong. And being able to recognize I don't know the answer, but I'll figure it out takes a lot. And there's not a lot of people that do that. And then the second thing I wanted to say is I asked a lot of questions around what is it that's pulling you towards these ideas of risk, and because that's not necessarily what you were brought up to do. And by the way, that's very common, right? What tends to happen is people either are an exact carbon copy of their parents or the opposite of their parents, right? And so and what's cool about that is that you had an amazing support system that encouraged you to reach out and essentially reach for the stars, right? Which is what you're going after. What I think is really neat is that what you're describing, and when I look through your history all the way back from even before that, it was club soccer and then it was golf. Um, you have a track record of going after these things to try to go after, not just go at settle for good, but go for great, right? And what I think is really cool about that is that successful people, that is a quality that is found in all of them, right? Is that you can't be willing to settle. And even if the first one doesn't work out, the second one doesn't work out, right? This is, by the way, the story of a lot of these true successful entrepreneurs, maybe from even that startup era, was they tried a lot of things and a lot of things failed, but then they landed on this one thing that was it, and they could pour all their heart and passion into. And it's the fact that they keep trying, they don't quit. I like how you said it. You said, when the motivation goes away, what's left is discipline. And I think what's really cool is you've demonstrated a track record of having the discipline to keep going, keep growing, and better yourself. And I hope that the people in your community recognize that if they get a chance to listen to this. So thank you for taking the time. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I'm really excited to see where all this goes.
Thank you guys. Well said. Well said.
Dude,
Appreciate it, guys. I
let
mean, that
me.
was
Oh wait, I'm not done yet,
mic drop.
bro. I
Mic
gotta.
drop.
I gotta follow that up somehow. Matt nailed that. I would say everything that Maddie said. Um, and I'll keep mine short because Matt actually took he like always he takes one of the thoughts out of my head. We're very good at doing that. The one additional thing I wanted to say is being vulnerable, man. Like it's amazing to me how we talked for I don't know, half hour on the phone, maybe a little bit longer to, do the initial meet and greet. You met Maddie 10 minutes before we went live. And then we went live on the internet for over 2 hours. And you were insanely vulnerable. And you told us like intimate details about your life and your backstory. And it takes a strong person to do that. And we just appreciate that because our show would suck if you didn't do that. And I just, it's cool to hear again, we say this a lot, but the same principles come up about, discipline and uh, taking risk and not giving up, but just through a different lens, right? You did that through two parents who are software computer engineers, and you learned some of that through golf. You learned it through a failing startup, and now you've learned it through Web3, already failing multiple times. And then to just cap it off, to reiterate what Matt said, I really do hope your community can listen to this, because these are the conversations that people need to listen to before they think, okay, I'm actually going to spend my hard-earned money on a project. Because if you're betting on people, which you ultimately are doing, you're not buying a you're buying a JPEG in a transaction, but you're ultimately betting on, can this founder provide value long term for this project? You fit the mold in that way, and I just appreciate you telling us the story, man. So that's it. And this is the final thing I always say: beginning of a long-lasting friendship. You're here long term. We absolutely are here long term, and we can't wait to win together and continue to grow our friendship together, man. Really appreciate it.
Cheers, guys. Thank you so much for having me on, and
Yeah.
it's been a pleasure.
Awesome. And with that being said, Midlife Crisis is out for the Tuesday edition. We'll be back Thursday. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. It's AAAFU. I think that's what they're going. Their PFP is a middle finger. They've got a really interesting idea, concept when it comes to minting. It's going to be a wild conversation. I can't wait for that one. We love you all. Midlife Crisis.